guys, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics, and today I want to talk to you about something kind of out of the box, but stick with me. I'm going to bring it back around to politics. I want to talk about Love is Blind Season 3, which I admittedly have been binging along with the rest of you. The season just wrapped last week, and ever since, the internet has been absolutely abuzz with hot takes on multiple relationships that were portrayed in the show, and for good reason. There were a lot of things to dissect and break down, and even though it's reality TV and it's kind of trashy or whatever, I think when you're watching relationships play out on TV like this, there are always lessons that can be learned. A lot of people have talked about Zanab and Cole and their relationship dynamics and their lack of communication, and I personally have learned a lot from observing them. But most importantly, the internet has been talking about another couple on the show, which is Colleen and Matt. Now, Colleen and Matt were one of, spoiler here, 2 of the 5 couples that ultimately did say I do at the altar. And this is actually really concerning people because throughout the buildup and leading up to their marriage, Matt was exhibiting really problematic, scary behaviors on the show. And during one particular scene, viewers really felt Matt passed a line. He was arguing with Colleen about an interaction she had with another man where he felt she had been disrespectful. But instead of staying calm and cool and reasonable in that interaction, he got heated. He got really angry. He seemed very controlling, very manipulative. He was gaslighting her. And throughout the whole scene, she's crying. She's pulling within herself. He's kind of dominating over her. And for anybody who's been around domestic violence, this was quite triggering to watch. And those initial bad feelings that a lot of us had were only amplified when it came to the reunion of the show, where they bring the cast back together months after filming wraps and kind of check in with them. During this appearance, Colleen also seemed very frightened. She seemed very unsure of herself, scared to speak. Matt was kind of hovering over her again the entire time, and it just made everybody feel quite uncomfortable. You can see from a roundup of tweets of people talking about this that I am by no means the only one who felt really icky about this whole thing. This person said, "Why did no one on that reunion call Matt out for his disgusting temper and his treatment of Colleen? Why didn't we watch that footage together?" Good question. You know, the producers and the hosts, they rolled back a lot of footage. They were very critical of a lot of people on the show, made them answer for things that they did during their time on the season. And yet when it came to Matt, it was absolute crickets, which was just very bizarre. Another person said, "Is Colleen okay? I'm genuinely concerned. Her shifty eyes and fake smiles were so scary this entire reunion episode. Someone please check on her. Matt is terrifying." Here's another one. "So everybody at the reunion just wanted to gang up on Cole instead of calling out Matt's clear as day abusive behavior he showcased on camera." This person said, "Matt is one of those guys who got his heart broken by one girl from high school and now all women have to pay the price. It's terrifying." And then lastly, this person said, "Love is Blind is deeply irresponsible for airing Colleen and Matt without acknowledging the massive red flags for domestic violence. Their scenes make me sick." Now, this actually goes even beyond people weighing in on TikTok and Twitter, of which there are many. Psychology Today actually weighed in on this and talked about how it was a problem that the show aired these scenes and normalized them, right? There was no disclaimers. There was no accountability for the behavior, nothing. They acted like it was totally fine and normal. Ultimately, we can't say what kind of relationship Matt and Colleen have. We have no idea. Reality shows are heavily edited, very manipulated. We only know the fragments that they're showing us, and ultimately we know through editing that they can be very manipulative with how they combine things. So we can't say, but I will say this, as someone who has lost someone to domestic violence, watching it was deeply troubling to me. A few years ago, a good friend of mine from college, Megan Montgomery, was actually murdered by her husband, who was a police officer. She had tried to leave him. She did everything we tell domestic abuse victims to do. The first time he hurt her, he shot her in the arm, trying to kill her the first time. She immediately left. She filed for divorce. She got rehab. She did everything she could to separate from him. She got restraining orders. It didn't matter because we don't really have that good of protections for people under our system when they are victims. And so he kept stalking her, and he ultimately killed her and left her in a parking lot. It was a tragic event in my life and the life of many others. And unfortunately, this is something that millions of other people in the US have experienced. And it's important to note that it's not just women who are victims of this. Domestic violence can touch many, many people of all socioeconomic classes and backgrounds and genders. But when it comes to what to do about this, I also have a lot of issues with how society often responds, which is in looking to the government to fix it. I personally don't believe that the government is that capable of coming in and preventing domestic violence. And there's a few reasons for that. One, police officers are actually one of the top offenders when it comes to domestic violence. In fact, the family violence rate is 2 to 4 times higher in the law enforcement community than in the general population. That's problematic. That means they're not going to arrest their own. They're probably more sympathetic to people who do commit domestic violence. And as a whole, these are often the bad guys. That was the case in my situation with my friend Megan. Her husband was a police officer in Alabama. But not only that, the laws that we have seen put in place to try to address domestic violence, like the Violence Against Women Act, are not cutting it. It's important to remember that the Violence Against Women Act, which the left still pushes all the time, was part of the initial 1994 crime bill. That's the bill that Joe Biden passed that we know beyond the shadow of a doubt led to mass incarceration, and it's largely condemned to this day. As the Nation reports, VAWA, which is what we call Violence Against Women Act for short, also contributed to mass incarceration and other forms of state violence, with women themselves often being among its victims. They say while rates of incarceration primarily remain disproportionately male, women's incarceration has increased twice as fast as men's in recent decades. Studies show that the rate of incarcerated women who have experienced physical or sexual violence prior to incarceration hovers around 90%. What does that mean? It means that when women call and report domestic violence, or men call and report domestic violence, often both parties are charged. Some of that is because you have a person retaliating when someone is violent against them. Some of it is because a person who has been victimized is more likely to become violent down the road. Either way, under VAWA, we really just ended up incarcerating a lot more women and men, and we didn't actually cut down on rates of domestic violence. We also made it harder for law-abiding people to get a gun and defend themselves, which is one of the best things people who are victims can do. And no shock here, but under VAWA, most of the increase in funding actually went to the aforementioned problematic police departments. Overall, VAWA was an extremely carceral bill that just absolutely did not make the dent that it claims, spent a ton of money, and ultimately had a lot of really bad repercussions. Instead of looking to the government to come in and fix things, and instead of expanding carceral solutions after violence has occurred, we instead need to do more preventative work, which includes education, teaching people what violence looks like, what the early signs of it are, what the red flags are. This is the problem when it comes to domestic violence, is people often have a pretty late stage picture of what it looks like, right? They see somebody hitting somebody else, somebody threatening them, somebody waving a gun around. And yes, it can get to those extremes, but that's rarely, if ever, how it starts. If that's how it started, nobody would stay in those relationships. Instead, domestic violence starts with things like being controlling, being manipulative, being a gaslighter, isolating people from their friends and family, breaking people down mentally and emotionally, all of the traits that we saw exhibited on Love is Blind this season. And over time, those things start to compound and escalate and get worse. And ultimately, you can get to these very dire situations where people's lives are in danger. But if we want to actually prevent domestic violence, we have to start teaching people to be aware of those signs and making sure that we also empower them to leave. Stop dating people who exhibit these early problematic signs, and as a society, push these people into getting treatment. It shouldn't be an option. We should absolutely refuse to engage with people who act like this until they get help. And one big way to educate people is through the culture. Love is Blind and other TV shows actually have an incredible opportunity and platform to make a difference. I love the solution Psychology Today put forward on this. They said the show should hire a psychologist or maybe a few to support the contestants. Yes, also normalize therapy, normalize couples therapy. That's a great thing. They also said the producers need to intervene when there's abuse. They must protect contestants' welfare. Yeah, watching that scene go down with Colleen, you really wanted a producer to step in and kind of checkmate and say, like, this isn't okay, and get her out of there. Third, they said they should air the number for the domestic violence hotline or other resources. That's an easy thing to do. And lastly, they said there should be a message on screen during abusive interaction so that viewers know the behavior is unacceptable and know not to normalize it. Again, I think that's vitally important that we start teaching people what early abuse looks like and not normalize it and not say that it's okay or excuse it. As a whole, I think Love is Blind could do a lot better, but as it is, the internet is fortunately taking advantage of the show and having a really big teaching moment right now that I hope we're listening to. Once again, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe to my channel, like the video, and leave a comment letting me know your thoughts. And until next time, stay based.